Hey guys, I'm really sorry for the wait on this chapter, but this should make up for the time lost. Crystal panicked, completely out of breath as she sat in the cockpit of her R-Wing alone. She had no idea what she was thinking, jumping into hyperspace as soon as she was surrounded by the black sky and stars. At this point, Crystal was completely lost, but it didn't matter, as long as she was as far away from Corneria as possible. The Vixen leaned her head back on the seat and closed her bloodshot eyes, allowing the R-Wing to drift as it pleased in the airless atmosphere. She wanted to cry, but her body was soaked dry and she had no more tears left to spare. Was this rash? Was she being too emotional by running away like this? Crystal had never done anything so impulsive and reckless in her life, but she knew that there was no turning back now. Fox did not want her to get hurt, but he should have known that any soldier would be perfectly at peace if she were doing what she was born to do. She let out a long sigh. Falco never seemed to like her much either. He would groan and roll his eyes when she so much as said a word to him. Crystal would suddenly feel a tinge of jealousy from his mind when she read his emotions, and she would immediately keep her distance. Peppy was always kind to her, and that gave Crystal a little pinch of regret, especially since her good friend Lucy was always there for her. Lucy reminded her of an old friend from long ago. Now couldn't be a worse time for the memory to haunt Crystal, but she couldn't repress it this time.
Turn back, my friend. You're throwing away a good life, like the one I used to have. Don't waste yours, Crystal.
Crystal began to sob as the voice reminded her of that horrible day. Crystal was out with her best friend, Serena, in the forest. They sat in their favorite climbing tree, giggling girlishly. Serena threw back her head and laughed, her long, white hair flowing with the wind. Crystal shook hers out as well. At this point it reached almost to her waist. The white fox tilted her head back up and grinned at her best friend.
So who do you think is cute? Come on, Chris, I told you who I like, and now it's your turn.
Crystal looked down and stroked the knife strapped at her ankle, a gift from her father. Its handle was hand-carved with tiny inscriptions and embedded with rubies and sapphires. It was truly the most stunning thing Crystal could ever hope to lay eyes on.
Honestly, Serena, I really don't like anyone yet. I'm not interested. I'm not even sure there is someone for me.
Serena rolled her eyes to the blue sky.
Crystal, don't be silly. Everyone has someone. You just haven't found yours yet.
Crystal combed her fingers through her long blue hair.
I suppose. At least we don't have arranged marriages like our parents did. Lucky for us, our parents are quite fond of each other.
They sat in silence for a while, enjoying each other's company and the warm breeze on their faces. Crystal reached over and took her friend's hand in hers.
You're my best friend, Serena. I don't know what I'd do without you.
The white fox grinned and took her friend's hand in both of hers.
And you are mine. We will be friends no matter how far we are or whomever we marry.
Crystal gave her friend's forehead an affectionate kiss, the symbol of eternal friendship and love. The moment was interrupted by a loud scream in the distance. Crystal's ears perked up at the sound, and both girls sat motionless in the tree like deer that had just heard a twig snap. Crystal could feel her heart pounding in her chest. She feared it would shake the branches in which she sat. After they felt they had been crouching for hours, Crystal inclined her head to peek through the branches at the ground. The sounds of screams still filled the air, and the horrible scent of smoke filled her nostrils. She jumped from the tree and landed quietly in the soft grass. Serena landed beside her, and they made their way through the forest and back to their village stealthily. The screams grew louder and louder as they neared, and Crystal found her feet breaking out into a run. Serena was not far behind. As both girls rounded the bend and came to the clearing, they stopped dead in their tracks. The tents and huts were all being devoured by orange and red flames. The sky seemed to have lost its beautiful blue glow, to be blackened with a blanket of smoke. The villagers ran wildly about, and it wasn't until she turned to the side did Crystal see who was responsible for this drastic deed. The creatures were the strangest she had ever seen. Giant reptiles ran amok, brandishing clubs, swords, and blazing torches. They snarled and cackled madly, chasing about the little children and women. The men and warriors of the village wielded their staffs, bows, and swords, charging at the monsters. Serena clutched Crystal's arm.
What's happening?
Crystal looked around wildly.
Where's my mother?
With their hands intertwined, the girls ran blindly through the smoke screen of screams. Each of them dodged the large creatures and raced towards the burning huts. Villagers bolted from their ravaged homes, holding limp children to their chests and crying out piercingly. There didn't seem to be any monsters on this side of the village, for they were all battling with the warriors. The girls reached their homes and looked inside the charred remains.
No one is here!
A sparkling luster caught Crystal's eye. It was sticking out of the remaining crackling flames and burning embers.
My mother's staff!
Without a second thought, Crystal reached into the doorway and pulled the beautifully engraved staff from the cooling ashes. It smoked slightly, but the fire left no mark on the flawless piece of metal.
Serena, look!
Crystal noticed a looming shadow and turned, expecting to see her best friend, but instead 2 large dragon men stood before her. The blue one's large claws clutched around the beautiful white fox's throat. Crystal stared at them in terror.
You let her go!
The dragons laughed ruthlessly as the larger green one reached out and grabbed Crystal by her scalp. The vixen thrashed about as he pulled her off her feet effortlessly, trying in vain to raise her mother's staff, but dropped it at her feet.
Look around, vixen!
The demon growled, forcefully turning Crystal's head to gaze upon all the devastation. She tried to close her eyes as she saw a little child being thrust into a raging fire, with the mother letting out a heart-wrenching cry as she was forced to watch. Tears pressed against the blue fox's eyes from the pain in her head and the horror surrounding her.
This is war, Pixie. The entire planet will be destroyed, so there's no use struggling.
Crystal reached out for her friend just feet away from her, but the blue dragon tightened his grip on her best friend's throat. With his other claw, he reached to his side and pulled out a long, razor-sharp sword. Holding it experimentally at the white fox's throat, Serena sobbed silently. Crystal's eyes went ablaze with fury. She fought against her captor with all her strength.
You heartless, bloody demons! Let her go or I'll kill you!
The dragons laughed mercilessly.
Oh, really? How? You can't even break free from my grasp.
Crystal struggled to free herself, biting down hard on the hand that held her in the air. The dragon merely smirked at her futile attempts to break free.
Enough of your childish tantrum. Now see the power of our might.
He nodded to his partner and held Crystal's head in place so she couldn't look away as the blue dragon shoved Serena to the ground and raised the sword up over his head once more. Crystal caught the look of pure shock and terror on Serena's face before the powerful blade fell. Crystal's heart plunged into her stomach. The once beautiful white fur of Serena was now matted with fresh red blood. The blue dragon removed his blood-stained sword from her back and wiped it on the grass. The tears poured from Crystal's once bright eyes, seeing her friend lying motionless on the ground, with blood pouring out from her back from a fresh wound that stabbed right through her chest and between her shoulder blades. Crystal screamed and shrieked so loud in agony she felt her throat would be torn from her grief and strain. She looked down at her best friend's lifeless body and the blood bubbling out of her mouth. Crystal doubled over and vomited. The green dragon withdrew his hand from her hair to avoid being puked on.
Revolting. Come on, Snake, finish her off already.
Green Dragon grabbed the blue vixen by the hair again and pulled her head back so her bare neck was exposed. Crystal took one last look at her friend, knowing that she had to get out of there. Her legs trembled, her throat burned, as the blue reptile raised his sword above his head once more. Crystal bent her leg up so she could reach the knife tied at her ankle. In one smooth motion, she brought the knife across her long, silky hair, releasing her from the giant's iron grip. He stood there, dumbstruck, holding her shiny cerulean hair. She ran and stooped down to pick up her mother's staff. Crystal panted heavily as she raced towards the large cloud runners grazing in the fields for escape. She dared not look back.